But I think what we solve for women is actually making it as easy as possible to care for yourself. And that's infrastructure, because I feel like oftentimes women are always caring for other people and they put themselves last, and they think that like I can do it myself, like I will find the time, like and then the day comes and you're like, actually I totally have not thought about this and I'm starving and my blood sugar is out of balance. Because my head was always in like nutrition and healthy food access, I was just shocked that there wasn't more of a standard of care for women's health, especially during such a pivotal life stage. People didn't really have a concept of a postpartum meal plan, or that really what does recovery look like. I think at that point, the people who were thinking about recovery, most of those early customers either had a friend, had family abroad and followed a specific practice like Chinese confinement as an example, and they'd seen that and didn't know how to do it themselves, didn't necessarily want the whole experience, but were intrigued by that idea of recovery.
Irene Liu is the co-founder and CEO of Chiyo, an integrative maternal nutrition company bringing food as medicine to every stage of the journey, from fertility through postpartum and more. Today, I'm really excited to dive into her story and what sparked the vision behind Chiyo, and to dive into what's next for them. Irene, welcome to Reclaim. Irene, I'm very excited to have you on. We were just saying before we started going online that we had met in person just about exactly a year ago. And there are a couple of things that come to mind for me, which is I thought it would be great if we can start with your origin, both your background and what really drove the birthing of Chiyo. I read your story, I've heard some of your story, but I think it'd be great for the listeners here, who many are founders and builders in health and wellness, particularly women's health, to hear your spark in the beginning of the journey.
My background before starting Chiyo was all in like healthy food access, solving for food deserts. That was like version one of food as medicine. And so I had done that, trying to do that in like a variety of ways. I started my career at Bain, so I was doing consulting, but I tried to do anything that was like grocery, retail oriented to understand like economics of the food system. And then I went to also work for a nonprofit. This was to service the south side of Chicago. This was like before, the Instacarts of the world. We were basically Instacart for the south side of Chicago, delivering grocery boxes. Like I was driving by myself sometimes to the south side, setting up booths, figuring out a new partnership with Chicago City Colleges. And so that was really good on the ground learning. And then I went to graduate school after that, and I decided to do my graduate school program on both a policy and a business degree, because I believed that it wasn't just going to be business that could solve this issue. Like grocery stores have a 2% margin that's not incentivizing enough for the most part. And I just believed that like you need policy and government to step in, similar to, Medicaid and why that exists. So I didn't really know what I was going to do with that degree. I think I just knew that I needed to learn and see what was out there. I went into school actually still sponsored by my consulting firm. And then I dabbled during that time also working in city government on economic development, and then also in BC, mostly a lot of dabbling to figure out where I could have the most impact in my role, and understand how all the pieces fit together. Because I also believe, like when I was working in the nonprofit, that's a band-aid, right? How do you actually help people get back on their feet and be self-sufficient? And so that's why I then, went into other avenues as well. While that was all happening, this was COVID while I was in graduate school. My aunt had a baby, and this was the first baby in the family for, probably since me. And so I got to see it up close and personal, her pregnancy looked like, her postpartum period, how hard that was. And I also saw my mom sending her these traditional Chinese postpartum meals. And I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. Like, what's the science behind it? Why do they eat these things? What do other countries do? What does the US do? And I think because my head was always in like nutrition and healthy food access, I was just shocked that there wasn't more of a standard of care for women's health, especially during such a pivotal life stage,
Yes.
and really like setting the foundation for both the mother and the baby. So I was like, well, yeah, like it makes sense what other countries are doing. Why don't we have this in the US? And I was like, well, let's just try it and see what happens. And so my founder and I basically just set up a pilot. I set up the first Shopify website. We sent an email to a prenatal yoga studio in New York just to see like, does anybody want a postpartum meal program delivered to your door? And I didn't even know if that was gonna be, like, our actual product. I just wanted to solve nutrition for maternal health and know what that would look like. Would it be physical? Would it be digital? Would it be geolocated specific? Would it be gestation diabetes? Like, I had no idea any of those questions. But we tried it out, and then basically what ended up happening is we did that for 5 weeks. Like, my co-founder would make the meals, I would meet her in
Wow.
New York, we would literally deliver it, classic startup story, drive
Wow.
around, deliver it ourselves. And at that point, I thought we were gonna take a break because I was like, "Oh, actually, the product needs a lot of work. Like, we're not ready to take this on as a company yet." But it was really good learning what people want, what they don't like, etc. What ended up happening was that basically 2 weeks into taking this break, right, I was seeing all of these orders on Shopify, which was what we use, and I was like, "Where are these coming from?" Because we don't do any advertising. Like, we are not at all, and we had become the first organic Google search result, and they kept coming. So we had, like, thousands of dollars in orders by the time I caught it, and then I emailed every and I was like, I'm so sorry, like, we don't have this ready. We're not operational right now. Like, we've taken a break. Can I refund you, or do you wanna wait? And I think we can get this up and running by mid-January." And everyone said they would rather wait until mid-January. And I was
Wow.
like, "Oh, no. Set this up for mid-January." So then scrambled, set it up
Yeah.
in mid-January. Yeah, and that was literally just, like, cobbling it together, and then we this was all in our first year, then we were featured in New York Times and Bon Appetit all within the next few months, and then kind of kept going
Wow.
from there. Yeah, so that was, like, the story. Very dramatic, very, you know,
Wow. Okay,
lucky
now
scope
so much there
yeah,
so much there to unpack. And so I'm wondering what drove your interest, your investment, and your passion in food as medicine, giving access to healthy, nutritious food. Because it sounded like that's always been there for you. And I'm curious if that started, really early on, or it was something that you needed to pay attention, as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, actually, I would say my mom was always really, really into all of that. Like, you weren't allowed to eat processed food at home, right? Like, I
No.
love hot Cheetos. I would
Me too.
sneak
Me
it
too.
in the cabinet. Yeah, and, like, eat it on my own. And so I just never knew anything different. Like, I thought every family grew up like that because of how I
Sure.
grew up. And then I went to Berkeley undergrad. I think you did as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I was at Berkeley, I thought I was going to be an education minor. And so I
Mm.
ended up doing some field work. One of the sites that I did field work at was a elementary school in Oakland, California, which I know Oakland has
Yeah.
changed a lot, but at the time it was a food desert area. And so I would take the bus from Berkeley to Oakland,
Wow.
set up a farmer's market, and actually like sell the produce from local farms. And
Oh.
it was such a formative experience because one, we were helping as Berkeley students, like revitalizing and stepping up the farmers market that normally that community didn't have access to. The closest grocery store was like 40 minutes by bus.
Mhm.
And so I think that was really formative to be like, oh, they should have these items. Why is
Wow.
it so hard for them to eat healthy? Is because it's literally so challenging to get access to it. They don't have 40 minutes, 80 minutes back and forth
Yeah.
to get the food. And then also so many of the ingredients, like we were teaching how to make things out of it. Like some people had never seen a fresh tomato before. We made fresh salsa. We taught them that it was really tasty, how to use it. People had never seen kale before, right? So like there's all these things that we like the world is such like a haves and have nots. And at the end of it, like nutrition is preventive and it's foundational to your health. So I think that has always stuck with me of like, how do we at least start here so that
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
has healthy food.
And did you find when you were So, because you were bringing Chinese medicine for postpartum, and I remember within my family culture, that was, a lot of the wisdom that my grandmother was bringing in, and there was the Chinese herbs, and it just tasted really bad, but it was really good for you. And we had all these food adoption practices that frankly, I still can't quite even communicate it. Like it was just kind of what was there. And so, how much education did you find you needed to do in terms of having your food, especially in the postpartum in the early days, like be understood because you were bringing the Eastern wisdom into it, and it's not like super common, right? I mean, which is why you went about it.
Yeah. I mean, from the earliest days, we had medical advisors. So we
Okay.
had Dr. Lily, who's our traditional Chinese medicine advisor. And she would do all of like the herbal broth and tonic formulations and set up the regimen for it. And then we'd also, follow TCM principles and how we thought and designed the menu. But I think what was also very important to me was being able to bridge TCM to, a broader audience
Yes.
and
Yes.
talking about it in a way that healthcare would be aligned with and people were speaking the same language. So I felt like a lot of the work that I was doing, like I never thought of myself as the expert. I thought of myself as the translator.
Mm,
So I would hear, we had a registered dietitian, we had a MD, and we had Dr. Lily who had, TCM principal. So it'd always be like, okay, we had a whole process for R&D where it's like, let's start with the stage. What do we know about this stage from TCM perspective of how things, what ingredients, the warming principles, etc. And then let's also do like a meta-analysis of all of the research studies that are out there and ACOG guidelines and things like that. And then how do we merge the two and then
mm.
design our menu off of that? So it was always a translation, but making sure that one did contradict the other.
Interesting. And I'm curious, so all the organic traffic, was that from blog content? And I guess I'm also just like wondering about the first customers, like how familiar were with more Eastern practices and traditional Chinese medicine, and like their willingness to adopt it, or was it more of like a willingness to try something new because there was a gap that they were feeling, right? I mean, I guess there's a couple of questions in
Yeah.
there. Like what was driving that organic activity? Was it written content? And it just seems so interesting to me to understand the first customers, right? Like where were they in their journey?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I will say that this was 5 years ago that we were doing this, like or, the first customer came in. So,
Yes.
I will say that, like, the fact that we were the first organic Google search result off a website that I wrote and built myself on Shopify, right?
Yes.
Like, not best practice at all,
Yeah.
but there really just weren't options back then, right? Like, people didn't really have a concept of a postpartum meal plan or that really what does recovery look like. I think at that point, the people who were thinking about recovery, most of those early customers either had a friend who, had family abroad and followed a specific practice, like, confinement, Chinese confinement, as an example. And they'd seen that and didn't know how to do it themselves, didn't necessarily want the whole experience, but were intrigued by that idea of recovery was one, or two, that they had read a book like The First 40 Days, which I think was one of the most popular books during that time. And again, like really liked what it stood for and learned a lot from it, but didn't want to implement it or didn't have the time to do it or figure out, where to get the ingredients. And so I think those were probably like our two early archetypes of
That makes
customer,
sense.
mostly because they're, like, bought into postpartum recovery. You're not convincing them they need to recover.
That totally makes sense. So then I guess that leads me to my next question before we talk about when you start to develop for other stages. But initially, when the orders were coming in and you weren't even able to fulfill, the folks were willing to wait, even though they were in that 40-day window, or were they planning for their future 40-day window, right? I'm just thinking about this like as a mom.
Yeah,
Like, I wish I knew about it when I had my first son. Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, I think that was what was so surprising to me that people would wait
Yeah.
because I thought of it as
Right.
something like you want it immediately.
Yes, exactly.
And so yeah, and so I think that it's a combination. Like, there were probably some people who maybe were a few weeks out and ordering ahead, so the gap wasn't as large. There
Got
were
it.
also some like, I remember messaging with a customer who had found us on Google search, like, on her way to the hospital, right? So, like, she was delivering, and for those customers who were willing to wait, I think they didn't have an alternative. Their alternative was either takeout or just figuring it out on their own, and they were okay waiting, like, "Okay, and in 2 weeks, I will get this full program." I
Got it.
didn't have a backup plan to slow
Got
down.
it. That makes so much sense. And that is surprising to me as well, just kind of given like your stage. And so then how long did it take for you to decide to expand to other stages of like women's health? Or were you primarily focused on postpartum for a pretty long period?
Yeah, we were focused on postpartum for a pretty long period. I wanna say, like, almost 2 years. We only did
Nice. Okay.
postpartum,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
the reason we expanded out of postpartum was, like, 1, we were hearing from a lot of customers who were transitioning out of postpartum. They're like, "Actually, I wanna, get my body ready for baby number 2 or 3," and they're like, "Can you help advise? Is there a new next program?" And so I think that was kind of always in the back of our head, like, at some point, we wanna figure out how do we be supportive in your next stage, but also I think my whole approach with Chiyo was that I want to be helpful when we can be helpful. I don't wanna be selling and convincing you that you need something that, like, if you have the support you need and you can do it at home, more power to you, right? Like, that was always my approach. And so, like, that was percolating in the back of my head, but, like, not so convinced yet. But then we also were stuck with some women's health clinics, oftentimes in the prenatal period, because they are the patient to postpartum, we were partnering with them. So then they would also ask us, like, "Do you have a prenatal program? Do you have a fertility program?" And so we're like, "Okay, like, when we feel ready, postpartum is stable, like, can we take on doing more R&D for every stage?" Because for us, it's quite an undertaking. As I said before, like, we do the TCM approach, then we do a meta-analysis, and then we actually make each stage very specific, both in ingredients, but also the program curation, how many macros, micros, calories that you're getting for each stage, because your caloric needs to change over time.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about making it useful and needed along the way versus convincing someone that they need it. I mean, they still have to be aware that they need it, but it is something that is useful for them, right? So I love that. Over the 5 years, and we had just started to talk about this as well, the landscape has changed a lot, right? So if you had to name your top 2 shifts over the last 5 years, is it that folks have been more aware about postpartum needs? Is it the changing conditions and the inputs, a different competitive landscape? Like, I'm wondering, like, the top 2 or 3, because 5 years in the startup phase is a long time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like the biggest waves or changes have happened even in the last, like, 1 to 2 years. But I
Okay.
probably s
Yeah.
it's kinda like the wave was, like, slowly happening, and then it's, like, dramatic in the last 1 to 2 years. But I think the biggest 2 changes, like, 1 is probably women's health has had a groundswell. It's, I think, still nascent, but at least a lot more women are aware of, gaps in care and taking more control in their healthcare too, including preventive and, like, what seemed as, like, lifestyle medicine ahead of, actually having an issue that they need to go to the emergency room as an example for. So I think that's number 1, around women's health, and then as a result of all of that, like, there's more investment in women's health, and so there's a lot more partners in women's health too that you can work with, or else it'd be really hard to build in an ecosystem of one, right?
Right, right.
And then the second part of it is more about the focus on nutrition. I will say that's probably largely driven by this administration, right? To take it more seriously, for
Okay.
better or for worse. Everyone feels differently about it. But I do think that there are a few bright spots from that, including, I think they recently published that hospital systems are now getting evaluated on their nutrition practices. Medical schools are they're getting more stringent about medical schools actually incorporating nutrition in more hours of education. This isn't in the last year, but in the last 2 years, right? Finally, a lot of these states are also reimbursing for nutrition, particularly if you qualify for Medicaid and using that to prove, ROI for healthcare outcomes. And so I think all of those things really are able to put nutrition into the healthcare system, not just a tangential lifestyle
Yes.
side thing.
Yes,
It's like
exactly.
foundational to.
No, that's true. And also not just for those who care about it, but can also are able to pay and able to afford it as well.
Then
So yeah. In terms of customer acquisition, has it primarily been driven because it sounded like it was organic? And then what I guess like what were the levers or inputs? Was it more paid acquisition? Was it more partnerships? Because you talked about building in an ecosystem. Like what kind of drove your acquisition landscape as you were growing and expanding beyond, your initial organic?
yeah, I think it's been a really interesting journey because we started bootstrapped, like,
Mm.
we were doing all the things with, you know, no budget, so we didn't
Yeah.
actually know that it was, like, as effective as it was. It was in our minds, we were like, "This is necessary because we have no budget." But I think what's been really interesting is as a result, like, the early days when we were bootstrapped, like, we did a lot of community-oriented events, like co-hosting events, working with brand partners and being the food vendor, a lot of, like, IRL interactions.
Mhm.
And I think at the time, because we were so small, we were like, "We don't know if this is scalable, but, like, this is what we can do now." And I think what was really interesting was as we expanded, we raised VC money, etcetera, then we built out more of a team, but we kind of lost the in-person IRL component,
I
and we
see.
started doing more paid acquisition and kind
Yeah.
of like more like traditional marketing, org,
Yeah.
etcetera. And we actually found, like, it was helpful to a certain extent and then had diminishing returns because we weren't also bolstering that with brand, community, all the things that we did in the early days. So then we last year, what this was part of it, like, dramatically rolled back paid and then,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
also restaffed in a very scrappy way. How do we actually do events and community and IRL at scale, which is, like, the big, push now, and, like,
Mm.
we always think of it as, like, paid. We are actually capping at a certain level, and when we see diminishing
Mm.
returns, we
Yeah.
we roll it back.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you bring that up and so timely because last night actually at this consumer dinner, we were talking about exactly that. Well, one, in this day of AI technology, in person activations, community building is more important than ever. And it really, like, it
Mhm.
needs to work in tandem with paid because if it's only paid, it's too expensive and absolutely
Right.
diminishing returns, but it does add a layer of visibility and exposure and sales if you augment that with ongoing community. And then one of the questions that came up was like, well, how can you scale a community, right? Like how can you scale in-person activations? And it's like, how is the brand thinking about it? So I'm curious like how Chio is thinking about it. Is like, are you focused on, certain locations or certain communities? And it's just like the scale reference, just different.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many components now, we've experimented a
Yeah.
bunch. I think on a location standpoint, like, we do prioritize cities that our customers are in and that we have team members in. The team
That makes
members part, I think, is important because I do think, and we try wherever possible, that we have, like, our own team member there staffing a
sense. Mhm.
table or being able to explain the product,
Yeah.
in the way that we want to be represented. And then
Yeah.
I think the second part is also making sure at the event, whether it's your own hosted or you're asked to be part of someone else's event, that you are showing up in a way that represents your product. So, for example, early days, like we might have just sent some meals because that's what the vendor asked us to do or the brand partner asked us to do. And I think upon reflection, we're like, actually, most people don't read or or put more thought into it unless someone tells them more about it. So if you don't have a person staffed there and you're sending them meals when like our differentiation is that it's a program, it's not just meal delivery of any kind, like you're not getting the point. Right.
That
So what's
makes
the
so
point of
much
even being
sense.
at that event? So
Exactly. Yes.
yeah, so I think like that's what's a really important part for us to have more guardrails around how we show up. And
Yeah.
so that then we can be more proactive about suggesting how and how we show up and how you explain Chio for the
Yeah.
event host as well. I think we're also really lucky that we have a bunch of Chio collective members. So that's,
Okay.
doulas, midwives, acupuncturists, pelvic floor therapists, etc. But
Mm.
like they are all huge advocates for us, including, not just referring their patients, but also like they're oftentimes bringing in their own community and hosting IRL events. And so they'll often tag us in to participate because it's so brand aligned. And so we try to support wherever possible. And we, as a result of being able to show up in those instances while not overwhelming our kitchen, we have like a very standard, I guess, playbook of like, this is what we
Oh,
send that the kitchen, these are the materials that will be there.
interesting. Are you finding that depending on channel, is postpartum still your hero program, or is it pretty evenly distributed between the different women's conditions or stages, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, um, it's still over 50% postpartum, but
Wow. Wow.
the other programs, balance, fertility, prenatal, those are all pretty equally split of the remaining half.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
yeah, and I think like that's how we started, and that's how like we have so
Yes.
much press around that too.
Sure.
So, and it's also a age where like when you're postpartum, nobody has the time to making meals, right? So like
Exactly. I was just gonna
the,
say
the
that, like, it's such an intense need. Yeah,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
can get that. Mhm.
Yeah. So I would say like postpartum and fertility are actually our two um, biggest, just because oftentimes, um, I like either for postpartum they don't have the time. For fertility, they are on a specific regimen if they're going through IVF and they have a specific timeline, that it helps to be on a program that's following the timeline that you're on.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes total sense. I guess maybe before we go into current landscape acquisition, like big news, I'm wondering, in terms of your channel mix, like what's
Yeah.
the breakdown between like organic, community, paid, email in terms of driving sales? And this is also just top of mind because we were just talking about this at dinner last night.
It's funny because it's changed pretty dramatically in the last month or 2 because so
Oh,
I'll just say, like, we were so busy with the acquisition the
yeah.
last, 6 months, and then
Yeah.
in January, it closed, and then I could resurface.
Yes, yes,
But as a
yes.
result, like, the last 2 months, we've been really, really focused on events and Chio Collective, which is, like, our community of practitioners, and that's, like, both initiatives that I am leading that is net it's not quite net new because we did it before, but like new focus and investment on. And
Sure.
so previous to
Mm.
January, like those were very nascent, like barely showed up. Events like
Oh,
zero. We were like barely doing events. And so previous to that, like it was mostly or like organic Google, organic social, and paid were the biggest drivers. I think paid was like 30, at least 30% of
oh,
sales.
interesting. Okay.
Um,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah, and since then, like, literally, we were looking at it yesterday, like, events and clinician, so, like, Chio Collective are kind of not quite at paid, but it's, like, on pace to get there.
Wow. The
Like, I think
speed.
both yeah,
Wow.
so, like, both
Wow.
of those channels grew, like, over 100.
Wow. That's quick velocity.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, like, it really was reactivation. Like, it's not like we were starting from 0, it was, like, it was a little bit dormant, and then we've been really excited about the results there, and knowing that, like, it is something that we can figure out and scale.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious actually, this just sparked, because the women who are coming through are entering their stages. So like postpartum, typically how long would they be enrolled in the program for? Do
Mhm.
they typically extend or is it a pretty short life cycle window per per customer?
Yeah, and it really depends on the customer. We have some customers, like I would say probably on average, people do either the 4-week or 6-week program. And then we have some customers who extend and keep extending. And so like
Okay.
we also have some customers who have done two of the 6-week programs. So a full 12-week. We've had customers who did like 26 weeks, right? Like
Wow.
the
Wow.
variance is pretty large. I think what's also been interesting is even if they do a shorter postpartum kind of time period with us, we see them come back for their second or their third and or that they continue on to the next program so that then they do a hormone balance or a fertility, like they kind of move through the life cycle. And so like, the company's been around for around 5 years. Like that's not
Mm.
enough time to know like the full customer journey when it's women's health. But it's been really interesting to see even customers who like they only did us for 2 weeks, right? Their postpartum the first time, and we're like, "Did they like it? Did they not?" But then they're like, "Oh, I'm back. I'm now my second baby." And we're like, "Oh, we're so glad that you liked it." But it's
Yes.
like the behavior is so different. It's not a reflection of if they were a promoter or not of the
Yeah.
program.
And I can see how it's also so subjective and so personal to each individual because sometimes, they're just going through a lot. They need it for those few weeks. Maybe their parents coming to
Right.
town. I
Or
mean,
their
I'm just
family needs it.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I can see how it's like super personalized and just really case by case, which I guess from a business
Yeah.
standpoint can make it more difficult to identify the patterns. But then to your
Yeah.
point, you care about or like the value there is just really like what is needed and what's useful. So I can get that.
When they tell us like, "Oh, my family's actually in town next week, can I cancel?" Like, we're always like, "Yes," like, having your family is the best,
Yeah,
so or
exactly.
can be the
Exactly.
best.
Right.
Like,
Depends.
no,
Yes. I mean,
no worries.
so I guess like current landscape, and you had already spoken to this, but you're now part of a much larger family. So, and I feel like I kind of got the sneak peek, when we were chatting about how you got to the acquisition. But I guess maybe we can talk about, or I love to hear like your vision around being acquired. You had mentioned early on about creating more access. And this has always been up until the acquisition, Chiyo has always been a self-pay model, correct?
Yeah, historically, we were self-pay, and then we took HSA and FSA funds as well, but still, it's
Okay.
like, not every income level that you can serve, and so
Sure.
I think what was really compelling about being epicured was, 1, being able to slot into their Medicaid contracts, and, they serve over 70% of Medicaid lives in New York State. So, like,
Wow.
it's a huge impact by being able to help service like their women's health division. So that's one like immediate thing that we're doing, and we're like literally in process of making changes to their Medicaid line through all of our Chio IP. So that's one, and then kind of like on smaller scales, we'd always wanted to do this and did it in some situations, but not at the same level. So like for example, on the research side, we did a bunch of research studies, but they're all like N of less than 20. Like, you know, we did in-house, maybe partner with Tiny Health for one of them too. And so now we are kind of working on a research study that's with a large academic institution with
Mm.
a one of the community health plans that Epicure works with. And so that's just a much larger scale, like RCT level study that then we can actually prove, ROI and have much higher level conversations around reimbursement. So that's like
Mm.
example number 2 that's underway too. And then also on the performance nutrition side, like this is one where they work with a number of sports teams, but they haven't done a women's sports team yet.
Oh.
And I think what I'm really excited about is like, can we adapt our CHIO program for female athletes because they're so much like at the forefront of representation and like what's possible, and
Right.
also just making sure that they can have the family they want because they're often delaying that as well, given
Yes.
the timeline that's needed for professional sports. And so that's also something that we are actively working on. And I think I'm really excited about it because women's sports is such a changing dynamic field, but we've really proven that women can sell seats and people are interested in women's sports.
Yes. That's super exciting. When you shared that, I got goosebumps because it's like that's so needed. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not aware of like customized programs like this for female athletes. I mean, that would be
Hmm.
phenomenal. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like a lot of female athletes are it's really hard on their body and they don't have regular cycles and that has
Right.
long-term impacts, right? But you don't think about
Right.
that earlier on. And so anyways, that's a lot of what Chio is about. So how do we get your body back in balance in an anti-inflammatory way?
Wow. Love that. Are you expecting to keep the Chio name and brand, or will that be absorbed in some degree or integrated differently?
For self-pay, we'll keep the Chio brand, and it's we still have our whole team on the Chio side running that. For Medicaid and any other, like, enterprise contracts, it's gonna be under the enterprise, or it's gonna be under the Epicure name just because it's easier for
Yes.
B2B contracts that they know, like, one one place that they're buying
That makes
from.
sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. That is so exciting. I mean, it sounds like this has been an unexpected acquisition and but it sounds like it's like the perfect fit or the perfect marriage if you can even say that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we were really lucky in that way, and that we were able to figure out that there is alignment very quickly.
Was Epicure looking to expand into women's health offerings and like the timing just worked out?
Yeah, I think they were planning to at some point. I think
Okay.
we expedited it.
That's a good
Um,
way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, but, like, they have a bunch of disease states that they have expanded into that aren't even available for self-pay, it's all on the healthcare contracted side, and they did women's health already, just not with dedicated resourcing or expertise, and so, like, I think as a result, through the acquisition, we can, move much more quickly in that direction, and now it's, like, fully ready for self-pay too.
Love it. Love it. Well, this podcast is called Reclaim. So one of the last questions we like to end and like wrap with is what are you helping your customers reclaim for themselves? And maybe this shifted from the time, you birthed the company to now, but like what would you say that's in play for now?
That's so hard to answer one.
I know.
I think for this is like my personal belief, I think it's infrastructure because I think a lot of yes, what we do is like care and nourishment, all those things is what we do, but I think what we solve for women is actually making it as easy as possible to care for yourself, and that's infrastructure because I feel like oftentimes women are always caring for other people and they put themselves last and they think that like I can do it myself, like I will find the time, like and then the day comes and you're like, actually I totally have not thought about this and I'm starving and my blood sugar is out of balance,
Mm.
or having trouble lactate, like so many things when you don't plan for yourself first. And so I think that is big part of why we do what we do.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so true. We do try to do it all. I wish there was a program that can help me like digest my emotional like weight. You know how it's like you got the headspace and then all this like
Mhm.
emotional processing with
Yeah.
family, with kids. You got your body and your hormones. It's like there's so much
Mhm.
processing that I feel like we go through every day.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, this is like freeing up your headspace
Yes,
and making sure
exactly.
you're fueled for what you do.
Yes, yes. I love that. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Destiny.